Today we will be speaking about the sixth of the six Goswami. Doesn't necessarily mean that there is a number, but he is the sixth of the. Since we have spoken about five Goswamis, he is the sixth. Gopal Bhatt Goswami. So, very much like Raghunath Das Goswami, not much is known about Gopal Bhatt Goswami for similar reason, because of his extreme humility. He always yes, I switched on Facebook. So he was always in a mood of glorifying others and taking the humble position. When Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was compiling Chaitanya Charitamrita, then he was talking to different devotees who had personal associations with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that way he was compiling the biography of Mahaprabhu. So when he came to Gopal Bhatt Goswami, then Gopal Bhatt Goswami said that I will agree to share, but on one condition, that my name should not be mentioned. And that was again just from a position of humility, that he didn't want a literature glorifying Mahaprabhu, and he did not consider himself suitable to be in the same literature. Krishnadas Kaviraj agreed, and that's why very little is known about him. Mostly it is gleaned through some other literatures, Bhakti Ratnakar primarily. So Gopal Bhatt Goswami himself had very limited association with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When he was a young boy of 7 to 8 years old, then Mahaprabhu came and stayed in his house for the 4 months of Chaturmas. That was the only association, that personal association that he had. So we know that when Mahaprabhu was turned 24 years, then he took sannyas. And after he took sannyas, he moved to Jagannath Puri. And then after staying in Jagannath Puri for a month or so, he decided to go on his South India yatra. And many purposes, as the usual personality of Godhead, many things are achieved through the same activity. So in his travel to South India, he converted huge tracts of communities to Vaishnavism. He visited in the mood of a sannyasi. He visited places of pilgrimage, and also he was searching for his brother, his elder brother Vishwambar, who had left house when he was a small child. So his elder brother had also taken sannyas, and knowing that sannyasis tend to congregate at places of pilgrimage, he was also traveling to various places, or wanted to travel to find out about his brother, which he did in Pandharpur. When he was returning back in Pandharpur, he then got the information from there that his brother had actually left his body over there. So when he started on his South India yatra, he traveled south, and he happened to be at Srirangam. The Srirangam, as you know, is in Tamil Nadu, and on the banks of the river Kaveri, I believe. It's on the banks of the river Kaveri. So there is this world famous, even at that time it was this famous temple, the Srirangam temple. So to this day, the Srirangam temple is the largest functioning Hindu temple in the world. It is it's almost the temple is almost like 6.8 million square feet, and its perimeter is about 10 million square feet. So it's large. We visited it, and it's almost like a city. It's a large temple. The only other temple that is larger than it is in Cambodia, the temple of Angkor Wat. But it's not a functioning temple. There's no deity over there. It's more like I guess it's more like a historical place. I haven't visited there, but I know people who went there, and they have like statues of Lord Vishnu, but there's no worship going on there. Srirangam is considered to be the largest functioning temple in the world, and famous in Srirangam is Ranganath deity. It's considered to be a self-manifested deity. So there is a very interesting pastime with respect to the deity, that back in Treta Yuga, when Lord Ram was out on his Vanvas, then he worshipped the deity of Ranganath. The Ranganath is considered to be a self-manifested deity, nobody made. And Lord Ram personally worshipped the deity. Later on, after defeating Ravan, and when he returned to Ayodhya, then Lord Ram took the deity along with him to Ayodhya. And Vibhishan also came along with him. So when time came for Vibhishan to go back to Lanka, so then he requested Lord Ram, to understanding that Lord Ram is not different from Lord Vishnu, he requested Lord Ram to give him this deity of Ranganath. And Lord Ram agreed. So Lord Ram said, you can take the deity with you, but on the condition that you do not set the deity on the ground. You will take the deity, carry him on your head all the way to Lanka. And Vibhishan said, okay, no problem. So if you see the deity is really big. It is Lord Vishnu in a reclining position. Really, really big. I would say maybe 17 to 18 feet. Generally, he is completely covered, as most of the deities in South Indian temples are, that the deity is completely covered with ornaments. But actually, we were fortunate when we went. There is a 40-day period in which the body of the deity is massaged with sandalwood oil. And at that time, the deities, they have minimal alankar. So you can see the magnificent black, the deities of black marble, very powerful deity. So Vibhishan took the deity, and he was traveling back to Lanka, and then he came on the bank of the river Kaveri, and there was a festival, a utsav that was going on. So while waiting for the procession to pass, Vibhishan, and this is of course all by the desire of the Lord, he absent-mindedly put the deity down. And then when the procession passed, then he started picking up the deity, but the deity would not move. And then Vibhishan remembered that he had made this promise. And he became very, very heartbroken, and he started praying to the deity, please come with me, I made a mistake. So the deity said, no, this is where I want to be, but as a special concession to you, I will always face you. So this is the only deity that is facing south, because in temple the deities are always facing east, especially South Indian temples. They're very particular about Vastu. So the deities are always facing east. When the sun rises, the first sun ray falls on the deity. Only temple where the deity is facing south, because Lanka is south. So Vibhishan in the morning, when he would get up, he would face the deity and pray to the deity, and the deity in a mood of reciprocation faces Lanka, or his devotee Vibhishan. So Srila Prabhupada would say that the highest deity worship standard in the world is in Srirangam. So it's the temple pujaris are essentially Sri Vaishnavas. The prominent preceptor of the Sri Vaishnavas is Sripad Ramanujacharya. He used to live in Srirangam. He used to worship the deity, and this is a place where he wrote Brahma Sutra, and he wrote his famous commentary on the Vishishta Advaita theology. Really speaking, the first major challenge to the philosophy of Shankaracharya. And if you read the biography of Ramanujacharya, you see that there are many loving exchanges with the deity. His and his disciples' life were around the deity. So the priests of Srirangam deity are very high quality priests. Apparently, they have to. I was hearing somewhere that there are different kinds of worship that they do, and they have to practice the chanting of the mantras for 7 years, deity worship for 7 years, dressing deities. So they have to actually almost 20-25 years they practice before they're allowed to go to the altar to worship the deities. And they're very pakka in the process of deity worship. So when Mahaprabhu was traveling, then the head priest of Srirangam was a priest by the name of Gopal Bhatt, from a Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, Brahman obviously, said from the Iyengar caste. And at that time was also the beginning of Chaturmas. So because sannyasis don't travel in Chaturmas, Mahaprabhu he wanted to stay there. And when he was in front of the deity, then Mahaprabhu was dancing ecstatically. So Gopal Bhatt was shocked to see Mahaprabhu in this way, because that's not the mood of worship in the temple. It's very much in the mood of worshipping Lord Vishnu, Lord of Aishwarya, Lord of awe and reverence. And then he saw how Mahaprabhu was singing and dancing, and this mode of worship was completely new to him. But looking at Mahaprabhu, because he himself was a very advanced devotee, looking at Mahaprabhu, he could understand that he's in the presence of divinity. So he came and he very respectfully spoke to Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu, young man of 24 years at the time, and he asked him who he is, etc. And then he requested Mahaprabhu that Chaturmas is beginning, so you please come and stay in my house for the 4 months. Which Mahaprabhu, he agreed. So Gopal Bhatt also had 2 brothers, Prabodhananda Saraswati and Tirumul Bhatt, both of them very famous scholars there. So the whole family was very elevated. So Mahaprabhu stayed there for 4 months. The son of the son of Venkat Bhatt is Gopal Bhatt, who later on became Gopal Bhatt Goswami. So at that time, he was a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and very much like Raghunath Bhatt. So Raghunath Bhatt was also a young boy of 10-11 years when Mahaprabhu was in the house of his father Tapan Mishra. So very much in the same mood, Gopal Bhatt got to do a lot of service for Mahaprabhu. He would clean his room, he would clean his clothes, he would serve him prasadam. So he had a very wonderful association for 4 months. And that was the only time that he met Mahaprabhu. After that, he did not meet Mahaprabhu. So during this stay, there is also this famous conversation that happens between Lord Chaitanya and the father of Gopal Bhatt, Venkat Bhatt. So once Lord Chaitanya, he asks Venkat Bhatt that he said, "My dear Brahman, can you help me understand something?" And he said, "Yes, if it is in my ability to do, I will." So he said, "Why is it that Lakshmi Devi, who is the most chaste of all women, aspired to leave her husband and enter into the Rasa Leela dance of Krishna?" So in the Puranas, it's mentioned that how Lakshmi Devi she performed austerities for thousands and thousands of years to enter the Rasa Mandal, to participate in the Rasa dance. So Mahaprabhu was pointing to that why is it that Lakshmi Devi, who's married to Lord Vishnu and is the most chaste of all women, left her husband and wanted to enter into the conjugal pastimes of Krishna. So Venkat Bhatt says that, what kind of a question is that? There is no difference between Krishna and Narayan. They are the same personality. So then Mahaprabhu said that if they are the same personality, then Lakshmi Devi should have been satisfied with Lord Narayan. And also, Lakshmi Devi was not able to enter the Rasa dance. So if they are the same personality, if she has full access to Lord Vishnu, she should also have full access to Sri Krishna. But the fact is, it is said that Lakshmi Devi even to this day is performing austerities to enter into the Rasa Leela pastimes of Krishna. So Venkat Bhatt at this point gives up and he says that all this is beyond my understanding, but the reason you're asking me is because you want to give me your mercy. So you please tell me. So then Mahaprabhu explains that even though Lakshmi Devi is an exalted devotee, the chaste wife of Lord Vishnu, but when she wanted to enter the Rasa dance, she wanted to enter in her spiritual form, which is extremely beautiful. Lakshmi Devi is she is the foremost of women, very, very beautiful. The gopis, they do not have any such consideration. They don't have any consideration of their form, their attire. There's the description in the Bhagavatam how the gopis they would put on their jewelries in an awkward way. Sometimes they would forget to put on their footwear. Sometimes they would hurriedly put on their clothes to go and meet Krishna when he would play the flute. So their level of surrender was that they had no attachment to their own consideration. Their only desire was to please Krishna. Lakshmi Devi, on the other hand, she still had vestiges of pride at being Shri. And while that was sufficient for her, purity was sufficient to get her the position of being a consort of Lord Vishnu, it was not sufficient for her to enter into the Rasa dance with Krishna. So in this way, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he proved that while Krishna and Vishnu are the same, but Krishna is original and Lord Vishnu is an expansion. So this conversation is often quoted in discussions when the position of Krishna and Vishnu is discussed, and when the relative bhavas are discussed between Madhurya Bhava of Krishna and Aishwarya Bhava of Narayan. So while Lakshmi Devi, being a consort of Lord Vishnu, has attraction for Krishna, the gopis, they don't have that attraction for Narayan. So there's another pastime in which Krishna disappears once and the gopis are moving around here and there searching for Krishna. And then Krishna, he takes the form of Lord Vishnu. And the gopis come by and they say, "Oh, Lord Narayan," and they give obeisances to him and they say, "Have you seen Krishna?" So they have that mood of being fully satisfied with Krishna. Even when Lord Narayan is in front of them, still they are searching for Krishna. So Venkat Bhatt accepted the logic of Mahaprabhu, and of course they had accepted Mahaprabhu as the personality of Godhead. So he glorified the position of Krishna and accepted the logic of Mahaprabhu. So as I mentioned, that as Mahaprabhu was living with Venkat Bhatt, Gopal Bhatt was getting a lot of association in a mood of service with Mahaprabhu. And one day he had a vision, a dream or a vision, in which Krishna appears and instructs him to go to the town of Vrindavan and there associate with his two devotees, namely Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. So when Gopal Bhatt had this dream, he became frantic because it was so real that he wanted to go. But then Mahaprabhu pacified him and said, "Meditate on this, and when the time is right, you will go." After 4 months, when Mahaprabhu was ready to leave, Gopal Bhatt was so attached to Mahaprabhu that he became inconsolable. He started crying and crying and crying, so much so that Mahaprabhu, he agreed to stay for a few more days, just to pacify him. And then after that, Mahaprabhu left. So after the departure of Mahaprabhu, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, well, wasn't a Goswami at that time, but Gopal Bhatt, young Gopal Bhatt, he grew up to become a prominent scholar. So he took guidance from his uncle Prabodhananda Saraswati. And because of the mercy of Mahaprabhu, he became actually famous as a great devotee and a great Vaishnava scholar in many angas. So at the same time, he was also meditating on the vision that he had of going to Vrindavan. So while he was meditating on it, he was also taking care of his parents. And then after some time, in due course of time, when his parents left his body, then Gopal Bhatt, he left Srirangam and went to Vrindavan. So we see here that there is so much dedication to the instructions, because at this time Mahaprabhu, he was present in Puri, and Gopal Bhatt's attachment to Mahaprabhu is very, very strong. But stronger than that is his attachment to the instructions of Mahaprabhu. So when he had this vision that Mahaprabhu had said that when the time is right, you go to Vrindavan. And that was his life and soul. So understanding that following instructions is much more than personal association, Gopal Bhatt, he headed to Vrindavan, and there he met the two stalwart disciples of Mahaprabhu, followers of Mahaprabhu, Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, who were very, very happy to meet him. So Gopal Bhatt now started living in Vrindavan, and there also his fame quickly spread, both as a scholar and as a devotee. He became a center of a lot of affection of other devotees there, and of course because of his vast knowledge, He was often involved in discussions, guidance, or advising others on Shastras. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard that Gopal Bhatt was living in Vrindavan, he was very, very happy. And in order to bless him, he sent his own personal belongings to Gopal Bhatt. So he sent him a small wooden seat, about 10 inches by 12 inches. That seat is still there in the Radharaman temple. You can still see that. He sent him his coping. So the personal items for worship. And he also sent him a letter. He gave him the instruction that you help Rupa and Sanatana Goswami compile Vaishnava literature. Very consistent instructions that he would give to the followers, that you compile Vaishnava literature, and then he said you live in Vrindavan as a complete renunciate. So don't depend on any form of security, don't establish a permanent resident, but simply depend on Krishna. So receiving the instructions of Mahaprabhu, Gopal Bhatt was very happy, and he took to worshipping the paraphernalia of Mahaprabhu, and following his instructions he compiled quite a few books. Perhaps the most famous contribution of his is in Hari Bhakti Vilas. So remember that Gopal Bhatt, he grew up in Srirangam, where deity worship is highest standard, and Hari Bhakti Vilas talks about deity worship. So he and Sanatana Goswami collaborated to write the book. So the book is generally attributed to Sanatana Goswami, and again it is said that Gopal Bhatt, because of his extreme humility, he refused to accept any acknowledgements in the book. So Bhakti Ratnakar does acknowledge his contribution. Sanatana Goswami, of course, was one of the primary authors, but the understanding is Gopal Bhatt Goswami was also either collaborating or he wrote, and Sanatana Goswami incorporated that in his book. And in Hari Bhakti Vilas, very, very detailed instructions are given about everything to do with deity worship, including how to take a bath, how to wear clothes, how to apply tilak, how to clean the temple, how to have how to worship the deity, how to bathe the deities, how to do abhishek. Very, very detailed instructions given. How to follow Ekadashi. So it's almost considered to be a handbook of practicing Vaishnavas. In the current day and age, so within ISKCON, the Hari Bhakti Vilas has been abridged into what is known as the Red Book. There are 2 volumes of the Red Book that are extracts of Hari Bhakti Vilas. They've been contemporized to be more practical, but they are still the handbook of worship in temple. Deity worship is done according to Hari Bhakti Vilas. Gopal Bhatt also wrote this book called Satkriya Saradipika, which is the 10 samskars that are done in the life of Vaishnava, right from the Garbhodaga samskar to the birth samskar, the cutting of the hair, Upanayan. So it's an interesting fusion of Vaishnavism with samskars. Pure Vaishnavism does not lend itself much to samskars. Their main focus is Krishna Bhakti. But practicing devotees are recommended to follow samskars because they create favorable impressions. So So the Kshatriya Saradipas essentially makes their samskars Vaishnav samskars. Right? Like we have Annaprashan. So Annaprashan is the grain eating samskars. And within Vaishnav, it is basically centered around Krishna. In addition to this, he also wrote the book called Samsar Deepika. And this is for the sannyasis. The whole sannyas ashram, how to take the names, what are the daily activities for sannyasis. And he also wrote Digdarshini, which is a commentary on Hari Bhakti Vilas. So Gopal Bhatt Goswami lived for a long time in Vrindavan, and it is said that at one point he developed this desire to worship, or more precisely to visit the Gandhika river, which, as you know, is in Nepal. So he made that journey all the way from Vrindavan to Gandhika river. Not sure how many miles, but I'm guessing at least 1,000 miles. And while he was bathing in the river, so as he was bathing, he put his hand in the water, and was basically the way you worship there is you worship with the water. So he put his hand in the water to offer the water back, and then he noticed that there were 12 shilas that came into his hand. There was a Damodar Shila, a Narasimha Shila, and Gopal Bhatt understood that perhaps the Lord is blessing him to worship him in this form. So he put the shilas in a bag, tied it around his neck, and then went back to Vrindavan. But however, when he reached Vrindavan, then he started, and this again goes to his extreme humility, he started having doubts whether he is actually qualified to worship the shilas. So you can understand how fixed he was in his understanding of the position of the Lord, and the shilas are considered to be the self-manifested form of Lord Vishnu. So after a lot of introspection, he decided that he was not qualified to worship. So he made the trip all the way back to Nepal, to Gandaki river, to put the shilas back in the river. So then when he entered into the river and the 12 shilas, he put them back in the water, then a most surprising thing happened, that the shilas jumped back and came into his hand. So thinking it was a coincidence, he put the shilas back, but this again happened a few times. Every time he would put the shila back, the shilas would come back into his hand. So Gopal Bhatti understood that this is the desire of the Lord. So happily he took the shilas again, went back to Vrindavan, and then with lot of love and devotion, he started worshipping the shilas. He would go everywhere carrying the shilas around his neck. So after almost 8 years, and this is around 1542, one day it so happened that it was a day of festivities. So as even now it is there, then it was stronger, that people would tend to give donations to sannyasis to increase their piety. So a rich merchant, he came and he gave in donation to Gopal Bhatt very nice jewelry and clothes for the deities. So Gopal Bhatt began to feel a lot of separation from his worshipping the Lord in a deity form, because Shaligram Shila is a Shila. It's difficult to clothe the deity, it's difficult to put ornaments on the deity, to do alankar. So he was feeling in his heart the strong desire to worship the Lord in a deity form. But he did his worship that day, went to sleep. Next day morning when he got up, and he was shocked to see that one of the Shilas had converted into a deity, and that's the famous Radharaman deity. So the Damodar Shila that he had became a deity, very, very beautiful deity. You can still see him in Vrindavan. A small deity, is less than 12 inches, but very exquisite. It's each and every features are very, very finely shown. And though in the temple you cannot see, but those who are pujaris or senior devotees, they say that behind you can still see the Shila from which the deity manifested. So, self-manifested deity. And Gopal Bhatt was so happy that he called all the other, he called Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, they all came running, and they were all taken in by the extreme beauty of the deity. So they named the deity as Radharaman. So Raman means one who gives pleasure, and Radha is of course Srimati Radharani. So it's the name of Krishna, famous for giving pleasure to Srimati Radharani. So one of the reasons they gave this name to the deity was because the deity appeared in that part of Vrindavan where during the Rasa dance Krishna disappears. And when Krishna disappears, then Srimati Radharani, her attachment to Krishna, it increases to a very intense level in separation. So it's a little counterintuitive to think that it is giving pleasure, but Vipralamba Bhav is considered to be or remembrance and separation, at least in Vaishnava theology, is considered to be the highest form of attachment. Because it is said that when you are in the presence, then the attachment is predicated on the presence of the person. But when the person is not there, then there is no impetus, there is no udipan. There is nothing really to nourish that attachment. The only thing to nourish that attachment is the love for the person. So that's why Vipralamba Bhav is considered to be the highest manifestation of love. Also, when you are personally associating, then the association is limited. Because when the gopis were associating with Krishna, then by the morning time, Krishna had to leave. So association would end at the time. But when Krishna left Vrindavan, then they never left the association of Krishna. 24/7 they were thinking of Krishna in separation. So actually their association increased. So in that mode, the deity is called Radharaman deity. Radharaman deity is the only deity of the 6 Goswamis that is present in his original form in Vrindavan to this day. So all the other deities of the other Goswamis, Radha Madan Mohan, Govindev, Gopinath, they all have been moved out of Vrindavan out of fear of Aurangzeb. And they are being worshipped in different parts in Rajasthan, some in Jaipur, Karoli. Because Radharaman deity was a small deity, less than 12 inches, the devotees assumed that the soldiers of Aurangzeb would not notice, or they would not be concerned about it, which was true. So they did not come and desecrate the temple or try to take the deity away. So Aurangzeb would do this, that he would take deities from the temple, and then he would have them converted into butcher stones, and he would have cows killed on them. So that's why when the pujaris would know that his soldiers are coming, they would hide the deities away from him. So over his life, Gopal Bhatt, he very nicely worshipped Radharaman deity, and it is said that Sanatan Goswami's Madan Mohan deity, he perfectly represents the lower part of Krishna, the lotus feet of Krishna. And Rupa Goswami's Govinda Dev deity perfectly represents the middle part of Krishna, the abdomen and chest of Krishna. And Madhu Pandit's Gopinath deity perfectly represents the face of Krishna. And appropriately, Madan Mohan deity is the presiding deity for Sambandha, and Govinda Dev for Abhiday, and Gopinath for Prayojan. Radha Raman is considered to be the perfection of all three. So, complete form of Krishna is considered to be represented perfectly in the Radha Raman deity. And if you go to the temple over there, they generally keep the deity a little bit away. I would say maybe about 10 to 15 feet away. Sometimes they'll bring closer, on festivals they bring closer. So the standard of worship over there is very, very high. Srila Prabhupada would say that in Vrindavan, if you have to see the highest worship standard, then you have to go to Radharaman. And they're so pakka over there that, and this is of course the legacy of Gopal Bhatt Goswami, that at different times of the day, the kirtans that they do is on different ragas. At some time the rag is more soothing. At some time when they wake up, it's a different kind of rag. When the Lord is eating, it's different kind of rag. And then there are devotees who specialize in these rags, and they basically, it's their service. You know, but some particular devotee or group of devotees, that they specialize in a certain rag, and they will come and sing. So when we were there, so we at least I didn't have that musical ear to appreciate so much the rag, but those who do, you know, they have this understanding that these rags are very pakka. They represent classical music and are related to developing or establishing a certain mood. The worship of the Radharaman deity. So when Gopal Bhatt Goswami was worshipping, then one of his disciple by the name of Gopinath Pujari, he was also assisting him in the worship of Radharaman. And Gopal Bhatt wanted to establish this standard and lineage for worshipping. So he asked Gopinath Pujari to marry and have children. And Gopinath Pujari said, so Gopal Bhatt of course himself was a Naishtik Brahmachari, lifelong celibate, and Gopinath Pujari also declined. He said, I'm not going to marry. But his younger brother, Damodar Das, so he asked his younger brother to marry. And the lineage from his younger brother to this day, it's an unbroken, so this is more seminal, but it's unbroken. The Pujaris to this day come from the lineage of Damodar Das. And when you go to the temple, you'll notice it's a completely different mood there. Nobody will ask you for money. Nobody will come and approach you for, let me show you the deity. All the times are very, very fixed. The time for the arti, the rag for the arti, the offerings that are made there. And then they also have this small sweet rice. They give it in clay pots, which are really, really very, very tasty. So you can give, nobody asks you, but you can give some donation. They'll generally give everybody, but if you give a donation, they give you a little bit more. They give you maybe 4 or 5 cups. They only leave 1 cups. But they will not they will not ask you for donation. They will not even, actually they don't even accept donations by hand. So I remember when we went, we wanted to get like large number of them to carry back for our family in Delhi. And so I had some money in my hand and I had it waving it in the air, and I was trying to get his attention to take the money. And then somebody told me that they don't take my hand, you just put it on the floor. So we dropped it on the floor, but he noticed it, and then he came and he gave us some 4 or 5 sweet rice, small pots. Srila Prabhupada actually asked many of his disciples to observe. He understood the standards over there as to height for us to follow in ISKCON, but he asked them to observe how the mood of the pujaris and how they worship over there. Gopal Bhatt also initiated, so he's one of his famous disciples is Srinivasacharya. We spoke about him earlier, that Srinivasacharya was initiated by Gopal Bhatt Goswami, and then Gopal Bhatt asked him to take shelter of Jiva Goswami, and he became the next wave of devotees to carry on the legacy of Mahaprabhu. Then later on Gopal Bhatt Goswami, he also established the Radharaman temple. It's still same temple. He established it, and if you go to the temple, his samadhi is still over there. So Gopal Bhatt, he was born in 1503, and he left his body when he was 75 years old in 1578, and his samadhi is still there at the Radharaman temple. He is considered to be Gunamanjari in his original spiritual form, and according to some, he is also Ananga Manjari. So Ananga Manjari, as we know, is the younger sister of Srimati Radharani, and she is also considered to be the expansion of Balram. So we know Lord Balram, he served Krishna in all the 5 rasas, and in conjugal rasa he serves as Ananga Manjari. So because of the mercy of Gopal Bhatt Goswami, we have the deity worship standards. We have the daily living standards of the Vaishnava. How does Vaishnava conduct themselves? And then we have his legacy living through the Radharaman temple, through Srinivasacharya, and through his Haribhakti Vilas, through his books. So this concludes our discussion on the 6 Goswamis. He was the 6th of the Goswami, and lot of similarity between him and between Gopal Bhatt and Raghunath Bhatt Goswami. They were both, as children, they worshipped. They're around the same age. He was born in 1503, he was born in 1502, and they got mercy at around the same time. That when Mahaprabhu, before going for the yatra, when he was going on the yatra, he met Gopal Bhatt Goswami, and then when he returned from the South India yatra, and then he went to Vrindavan, then he met Raghunath Bhatt Goswami at the time. So around the same time, a year here and there, they met, and both lived in Vrindavan for a long time, more than 50 years. They both lived and gave association to one another. So I'll pause over here and see if there is any comments or discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I just wanted wanted to ask you out of curiosity, the Ranganathan temple, the presiding deity, is it the one of Vishnu reclining on Sheshnag? Does the presiding duty, right?
Yeah, okay. you see him. He's lying, and there is the big Ananta Shesh behind him, and he's a large marble deity in a reclining position.
Right. Oh, because I had visited the temple when I was 15 years old, but I remember only a little bit here and there. That's why it just came back to me when you were talking about Ranganathan temple in Krishnapalli. I don't remember its size, but I just remember the deity very clearly because, very, very clearly. And there was another question, Prabhu. Like, I know that it's a Vaishnava temple. It's the Sri Sampradaya, right? Mm-hmm. But they actually worship Vishnu in Vishnu form, not in Krishna form, typically.
Okay.
So is Vaishnavism anything to do with Krishna and Krishna's expansions, or is it basically only with Krishna, worship of Krishna? So I always get confused because some temples have a principal deity not in Krishna form but in some other form. That's why I'm asking the question.
So the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, their primary deity of worship is Lord Vishnu. They, while they accept the position of Krishna, and depending on who you talk to, their predominant philosophy is that Krishna is one of the incarnations of Lord Vishnu. They consider Lord Vishnu to be. That's why there was this debate that happened between Venkat Bhatt and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the point that he wanted to show was the other way around. That Lord Vishnu is an expansion of Krishna. But the Sri Sampradaya, they predominantly accept the position of Lord Vishnu as supreme, and of course they consider Krishna to be non-different. They accept Krishna, but in a slightly different mode, and they are attracted to more Aishwarya Bhav, so they worship in that way. Even in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, while they accept the position of Krishna as supreme, they worship Radha Krishna in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan.
Okay.
Because Radha Krishna worship is very different. ISKCON does not worship Radha in the mood of Radha Krishna, because that mood is very different. It's a mood of lot of familiarity and intimacy, and obviously it's not something that you can instruct somebody. It has to come from within. So in order to prevent any kind of offenses being done, where people start saying, well, Radha Krishna, whenever Krishna is hungry, we'll feed him, or today he's in the mood of dressing, of wearing this kind of clothes. Today he wants to wear a peacock feather and a flute. So in Vrindavan we see the temples, not the Goswami temples, they are still worshipping Lakshmi Narayan, but some of the other temples of the other Goswamis, they're very, very different mode of worship there. So most of Gaudiya Vaishnava, they worship Radha Krishna and Lakshmi Narayan, but accepting the position of Krishna as supreme.
Okay.
Most of the other sampradayas, with the exception of Kumar Sampradaya, Kumar Sampradaya also worship Radha Krishna, but the Rudra Sampradaya and the fourth is which is the fourth Sampradaya? The Brahma Sampradaya, the Rudra Sampradaya, the Sri Sampradaya, and the Kumar Sampradaya. The Rudra Sampradaya, they also worship, my understanding is Lord Vishnu.
Krishna Prabhu, just a question regarding when they consider Vishnu as a supreme, right, and then Krishna as avatar of supreme. Isn't this considered as a tattva vibram? Because as the tattva, Krishna is the supreme, in all cases.
So in the Nectar of Devotion it is written that one who makes a distinction between Krishna and Vishnu will go to hell. Right, so they do want to make this point that one should not consider this. In the Brahma Samhita, the famous slok Deeparichi Reva Idasantaram Upete, that just like one candle lights many other candles, and then there is no difference between the other candles and the original candle. The only difference is one candle lit another candle. So they say the original candle is Krishna and others are Lord Vishnu, but there's no difference between the two. So the point that you're making, I'm not sure it is Tattva Vibhrama. It is just their mood of worshipping, right? Like Lakshmi Devi is worshipping Krishna in the form of Lord Vishnu. It's not Tattva Vibhrama. That is the mood in which she worships Lord. That's the mood in which she accepts Lord Krishna, right? So it's a bona fide. Aishwarya Bhav is a bona fide form. Now, saying that Krishna is an expansion of Lord Vishnu, there are a lot of Vaishnava scholars have written both ways on this. That what does it mean when they say Krishna is an expansion of Lord Vishnu? There are several places in Vaishnava literature where the same point is made, that Krishna is an expansion of Lord Vishnu. And the analogy that is given is, because Lord Vishnu is Krishna in the material world, right? When Krishna comes to the material world, then Garbhodaksha Vishnu, Karnodaksha Vishnu, Shredaksha Vishnu. So the analogy that is given is that when a king enters into, let's assume, a prison house, he has to take permission from the warden. The warden says, okay, now you can go. Even though he's the king, he has to take permission from the warden. Because the prison house is under the dominion of the warden. So similarly, when Krishna comes, he comes through Lord Vishnu. So that statement is not incorrect. When it is said that Krishna is coming through Lord Vishnu, that statement is not incorrect. But it is correct in a certain context. So as long as that context is understood, there is no real offense over there. And as far as I know, there are no Vaishnavas who will deny the position of Krishna. That would be offensive. Right? There is nobody who says that, no, Krishna is not the personality of Godhead and he was just somebody. There is no Vaishnava who will say that. Whether in Shri Sampradaya or Rudra Sampradaya, right? They all accept Krishna as the personality of Godhead. That would be Tattva Vibhrama if they said something like that.
One more following question was there. So if we worship Radha Krishna as Lakshmi Narayan, then how do we get into Vrindavan? Because then we will go to Vaikuntha, not the Goloka.
So the deity worship that we are doing is in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan. The chanting that we are doing is in the mood of Radha Krishna. And the Achinta Bheda Bhed Tattva, so the Tattva that we follow is in the mood of Radha Krishna. It's like you take Radha Krishna to your house, knowing that they are Radha Krishna, but then you accept the fact that you are not ready to worship them in that mood. Like the example is given that there is a great personality and his son is estranged from him. And then by some good fortune, he reunites with his father. And he says to his father, come to my house. So the father comes to his house. Son knows this is my father. But he is not going to jump on his lap or hug him because that estrangement is there, that mood of awe and reverence is there. So he will treat him with a lot of deference and respect, which is all appropriate in a father-son relationship. Right? But then as the relationship will mature, as the father continues to stay in the house, then more spontaneous love and affection will come. So even in our worship, as our worship becomes more and more mature, then in the Nectar of Devotion is written that then we basically from Sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti, we move to what is known as Raghunath Bhakti. Now what is Raghunath Bhakti? Raghunath Bhakti is that we follow in the footsteps of one who is worshipping Krishna in a personal mood, right? So then we start worshipping Krishna in that mood there.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay. Piyali, please, you want?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I think Piyali had a point. After that, you can.
Sure.
Sorry.
This was a very tangential point about Gandaki River and the fossilized stones. That where did this concept come from? That the Shilas from Gandaki River is equivalent to worshipping the Lord. Like, I'm just curious about the backstory, but it's very tangential for the rest of the discussion. So maybe Sujit Prabhu can go first.
I can briefly talk about it, and maybe this is a topic for another, because it's a whole pastime. But in Brahma Vaivarta Purana, it's described that Tulsi Devi, she married. She married Jalandhar, a demon, and the demon was so powerful that nobody could kill him because of the chastity of Tulsi Devi. And then the Devas went and prayed to Lord Vishnu that as long as the chastity of Tulsi Devi is maintained, we can't kill, and he's basically conquered everybody. So then Lord Vishnu, he takes the form of her husband and spends the night with her. So when the chastity is broken, then they polish off the demon, they kill him. And Tulsi Devi then of course realizes what has happened. So then she curses Krishna that you are so hard-hearted that you had my husband killed, tricked me. So then Krishna accepts the curse and says that according to your curse, I will become stone, and a particular kind of insect, I think it's called Vajradanta, will eat into me and cause parts of me to break off. And then he gave her the blessings also, the benediction, that you will become a plant and I will eternally be worshipped by you. That's how Tulsi Devi acquired this position of being such. Anything that we offer to Krishna is with Tulsi Devi in the house. All Vaishnavas will have Tulsi Devi in the house. So, because of this benediction given by Lord Vishnu, and that by the force of that curse, then Lord Vishnu assumed the form of this black stone in the Gandaki River. And the stone is said to be very, very hard, and there are those small insects called Vajradanta, and they eat into that stone and the Shila's form, and they break that form. So each of the Shila has a unique pattern that is made, and based on that pattern, those who understand the science, they say this is Damodar Shila, this is Narsingh Shila, this is different. They have different signs to. Like when we got our Shila, then there is an ISKCON sannyasi who actually goes every year, or at least at that time, not sure now, goes to Gandaki River, and he would pray there and get the Shilas. And then he was the one who identified that this is Anant Vasudev, and then he gave it to our Gurudev in Mayapur, and then we had expressed desire to worship. So then our Gurudev gave us the Shila and said this is Anant Vasudev Shila, so we are worshipping. And because they are self-manifested form, so they are different from deities. And deities you have to do pran pratishtha, right? Because deities are essentially, initially they are statues. Whether they're made of wood or metal, they're statues. and then you do pran pratishtha, you establish the deity and then worship. In case of Shaligram Shilas, the Lord is eternally present there. There is no pran pratishtha that's done. So that's why when our Guru Maharaj gave the Shila to us, then he said you have to understand that you can never stop the worship of the Shila. Right? Not for a day. Even for a day you can't stop the worship of the Shila. So that's why even when we travel, we take Shila along with us, and it's just one of our commitments there. It's a much more involved pastime. Maybe another time we'll talk, but just as a brief summary of that.
I've noticed and seen this in many people who have the Shaligram, who have the Shila, but I did not know because it's always considered that it already has pran and continuously it has pran in the Shila.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Sachijivan Prabhu?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Sorry, I was trying to ask this question multiple times in between. So just a curious question, Prabhu, which came across to me, to which I didn't have a satisfactory answer myself. So normally we are called Vaishnavas, or all the sampradayas, these four sampradayas, normally they are known as Vaishnavas, which comes from Vishnu, even if we are worshipping Krishna. So is there any specific analogy, Prabhu? I mean, why it is called Vaishnava, not Krishnavas or something, which is more kind of appropriate coming from Krishna?
I have heard that question asked many times before, Prabhu, and like you, I haven't, or maybe there is no fully satisfactory answer. The answer that I've heard, which I can repeat to you, and I'm sure you've heard it other ways also, is at other places, is that there's no difference between Lord Vishnu and Krishna. So when you say Vaishnava Sampradayas are worshipping Lord Vishnu, it is analogous to saying that they're worshipping Krishna.
Okay, bro.
Yeah, your question is that why not call Krishnas or something like that, right?
The question came from that way that the name Vaishnava says that its original is Vishnu. That's how the question comes to me. So
I hear you, and yes, I think like I said, I've heard many answers that none that are fully satisfactory. Some say that because we worship Krishna as Vishnu, we call Vaishnavas, and some the answer given to me by my Guru Maharaj is that no difference. I had asked this question very, very early on to him, that why we call Vaishnavas, why not Krishnas or something like that. And then he said, why are you making a distinction between Krishna and Vishnu? And then he asked me to read this section, so that's the closest answer that I have.
Prabhu, it's not a question, I just have a commentary. I do not know, I just feel that the form in which Krishna is worshipped is just a little bit more regional. Like, if you go to Orissa, it's always going to be Jagannath, Balaram and Subhadra. If you go to the south of India, typically it's in the Venkateshwara form or Ranganathan form. And then if you go elsewhere to the west, it's a different form. So, and Vrindavan is Krishna, as Krishna form. So I just think it's regional. I'm not sure. It just feels like that. So more than one form is superior, or who's the original and all of it. Instead of that, it's just what you just grew up with, what your regional influences. That's my feeling. I may be totally wrong and off base here.
And I think also because Krishna appeared in Vrindavan, that's why there's a lot of attraction over there.
I think in Gujarat it's not much of Vishnu, it's always Dwarkadhish, like Krishna only. We say whole of the Gujarat, there are very few Vishnu worshippers, they're mostly all Krishna.
Yeah, either there is Krishna in the child form.
Yeah, Laddu Gopal or
Krishna.
Almost every Gujarati will have that.
Yeah, Dwarkadish Krishna.
Or Srinathji, which is Gopu, like in New Vrindavan we have Gopu Kumar.
Okay, very good. So if there are no more questions.
Guruji, can I ask something quickly? Ruchi here.
Hare Krishna, Ruchi. Sure, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Guruji, if you could summarize quickly, what was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu trying to teach us through each Goswami? Like, what each Goswami, we should look up to basically be like that quality, imbibe that quality in us.
It's a good question, and I'm not sure if you or somebody else asked that earlier on. There has been some attempts to attribute, because Mahaprabhu's instructions were very consistent. Like the original instructions that he gave to Rupa Sanatana Goswami was establish places of worship, write Vaishnava literature, build temples, and Vaishnava lifestyle. Establish the Vaishnava lifestyle. These were the 4 instructions in Chaitanya Charitamrita it's given that he gave to Rupa Sanatana Goswami, and these were the 4 instructions that he would give to everybody that he sent to Vrindavan. Some he emphasized one a little bit more than others. But if you see all the 6 Goswamis, they kind of manifested the same the same mood to follow these 4 instructions. Like now Rupa Sanatana Goswami are more famous because they also established places of worship. But the other Goswamis, they established temples, they established deities, they wrote books, and they initiated devotees and disciples and started the sampradaya. So there is no clear attribution that one devotee is one particular Goswami exemplifies a particular instruction of Mahaprabhu to a greater extent than others. Now, having said that, there are some scholars who try and do that. Raghunath Das Goswami, he demonstrates the extreme renunciation. We see he was very, 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 very renounced. And Jiva Goswami, he displays the knowledge aspect of it. But I'm hesitant to subscribe to it because it's not really considered to be, it's not really widely accepted. Right. General acceptance says that they all absorbed his instructions and they manifested it to the best of their ability and according to their nature.
Thank you, Ruchi.
Thank you, Ruchi.
Last question, sorry.
Sure, please go ahead.
I'm just keeping everybody from their dinners probably. The surname Goswami, it's very common in Bengal, actually. So, are they somehow some kind of lineage from the 6 Goswamis? Do you happen to know? I'm just curious because I have a lot of friends whose surname is Goswami.
It's not more of a lineage, it's a title that later on became a lineage. Because Goswamis they were all celibates. They didn't have any children.
Okay.
But Goswami essentially means one who is control of the senses. So it's a title that's given when devotees are advanced, regardless of the ashram, whether the person is married or not. And then eventually it's like you also see, at least in the area of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, you see people with the titles of Trivedi, Chaturvedi, right? So initially it used to be an honorific title. Like once a person masters the study of 3 Vedas,
Trivedi.
Then they were called Trivedi, Chaturvedis, etc. Then later on it just became a surname. after that. So same thing happened with Goswami also. It was initially an honorific title, and then later on it was adopted as a surname. Okay, thank you for all the wonderful questions. So we'll stop over here, and if you can unmute yourself, and we'll chant one round of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna Krishna